What if one of the toughest men on Moonshiners suddenly faced something he couldn't fight with skill or strength alone? Just minutes ago, Digger MINS shared news that has fans deeply concerned, and it's not the kind of update anyone was expecting. Known for his grit and quiet resilience, Digger is now opening up about a battle that's far more personal and far more serious. So what exactly did he reveal? And is he really okay? They called him Digger long before the world knew his name. Growing up as Eric MINS in the misty foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains, he was a quiet kid who paid close attention to how things worked, whether it was a ticking clock, an engine, or the rhythms of life itself. Born on February 20th, 1964 in Newport, Tennessee, he was raised in a place where the air smelled of pine and rain, and where community meant everything. In that small town, respect wasn't something you learned in school. It was something you absorbed from the people around you, in conversations on front porches and through the quiet understanding that neighbors always looked out for each other. His father, Charlie MINS, ran the local funeral home, a place most children would avoid. But for Digger, it became an unexpected classroom. After school, he would sweep floors and polish coffins, watching closely as his father handled grief with calm dignity. Over time, he learned to assist with preparing bodies for burial, a responsibility that demanded both precision and emotional strength. In that solemn environment, Digger didn't just learn about death, he learned discipline, patience, and the importance of doing things the right way, no matter how difficult the task. That attention to detail stayed with him. The stillness of the funeral home, the quiet conversations, and the unspoken lessons shaped the kind of man he would become. While other teenagers dreamed of leaving town, Digger was being molded by something deeper, by responsibility, by routine, and by watching a man who carried heavy burdens without complaint. But outside those walls, another world was calling. In the hills around Newport, men gathered at night, working in silence among the trees. Copper stills glowed faintly in the dark, and the air carried the scent of something being transformed. Digger watched, fascinated, as these men turned simple ingredients into something powerful. To outsiders, they might have looked like outlaws, but to him, they were craftsmen. They shared what they had, helped one another without question, and took pride in doing things the right way, even when it meant taking the harder path. And somewhere between the quiet of the funeral home and the fire of those stills, Digger MINS began to understand exactly who he was becoming. Digger grew up between two completely different worlds. Inside the funeral home, everything was quiet, controlled, and heavy with meaning. Outside, in the hills and deep woods, life felt raw, unpredictable, and alive. One taught him discipline, the other gave him a sense of freedom. Somewhere between those two extremes, he began to figure out who he really was. Not someone chasing approval or fear, but someone who simply wanted to master something with his own hands. He found comfort in the steady, methodical work his father showed him, understanding the careful process behind preparing someone for their final rest. But out in the woods, something else stirred inside him. Watching Moonshiners transform fire, copper, and time into something powerful lit a different kind of curiosity. It wasn't rebellion that drew him in, it was fascination. There was something almost magical about creating something real, something earned through patience and skill, even if the world called it wrong. As the nights grew quieter, that pull became harder to ignore. The faint glow of copper stills hidden in the hills seemed to call out to him, offering something beyond duty and routine. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a feeling he couldn't quite explain, something stronger than fear or expectation. And out there, beyond the trees, was someone who would shape that feeling into something much bigger. Before the cameras, before the fame, there was a man who would change everything for him. Marvin "Popcorn" Sutton, a legendary figure from Maggie Valley, North Carolina, was known across Appalachia for his sharp tongue, fearless attitude, and unmatched skill. He had spent a lifetime perfecting his craft while staying one step ahead of the law, carrying generations of knowledge that was never written down, only passed through fire, smoke, and experience. Digger didn't meet Popcorn Sutton by chance. It happened because he earned it. In a world where trust was everything, Popcorn had a sharp instinct for people, and he could spot a fake from a mile away. But Digger was different. He didn't talk big or try to impress anyone. He showed up, did the work, and paid attention. That quiet dedication opened a door most never got near. Popcorn took him in, not just as a helper, but as someone worth teaching. Under his guidance, Digger learned how to read a still like a living thing, how to control the heat through instinct, how to listen to the run, and how to know when everything was just right without relying on any tools. But Popcorn didn't just teach technique, he taught meaning. His message was simple but powerful. Don't do it for greed, do it for pride. That idea stuck with Digger. To him, moonshining wasn't about fast money or breaking rules. It was about craftsmanship, patience, and honoring a tradition that had been passed down for generations. Every long night hauling corn, chopping wood, and standing beside the fire became something more than just labor. It felt like purpose. Over time, Digger began to see the process differently. The still wasn't just equipment, it was alive. The copper lines carried heat like veins, the mash bubbled with energy, and every stage of the run had its own rhythm. He came to understand the science behind it too. How sugar fed the yeast, how heat transformed liquid into vapor, and how that vapor cooled back into something pure. It was a balance of knowledge and instinct, of chemistry and soul. To outsiders, it might have looked illegal, but to Digger, it was a craft rooted in history, something that started as survival for mountain families and grew into an art form. And then, just like that, it almost disappeared. Popcorn Sutton had spent years staying one step ahead of the law, but eventually it caught up with him. When he was gone, it wasn't just the loss of a man, it felt like the end of an era. The mountains seemed quieter, the fires dimmer. For Digger, losing Popcorn meant losing the last true link to a way of life that few people understood anymore. The loss of Popcorn didn't break Digger. It sharpened him. Instead of walking away, he made a quiet promise to himself. The craft wouldn't disappear into the dark. Everything he had been taught would live on through his work. So he kept the stills running, not for attention, but for the same sense of pride his mentor had carried. Every batch he made felt like a continuation of those lessons, as if Popcorn were still there, steadying the flame. To Digger, tradition wasn't meant to fade. It was meant to evolve and be carried forward, one careful run at a time. Years later, that promise would be tested in a way he never expected. The man who once worked in the shadows of the Smoky Mountains was suddenly being pulled toward the spotlight. For nearly 4 decades, Digger had lived in a world lit only by firelight, not cameras. Moonshining was never meant to be seen. It was something protected, almost sacred. But fate had other plans. The turning point came through his longtime friend Mark Ramsey. Mark had already stepped into a new world by appearing on the Discovery Channel's Moonshiners, a show that dared to reveal the hidden craft to the public. To Digger, the idea felt wrong, like breaking an unspoken rule. Men like him weren't meant to be on television. They were meant to stay invisible, to let the work speak for itself. But Mark saw it differently. He believed their story, built on history, skill, and tradition, deserved to be told the right way. When he asked Digger to join him, the answer was an immediate no. Digger had spent decades perfecting the art of staying out of sight, and he was comfortable there. Fame wasn't something he wanted. Still, Mark didn't back down. He warned that if they didn't tell their own story, someone else would, and they might get it all wrong. And that thought stayed with Digger longer than he expected. When Digger first stepped in front of the cameras, it wasn't with confidence, it was with hesitation. He had spent his whole life staying hidden, so being seen felt unnatural. But the moment he appeared on screen, people noticed something different. He wasn't acting. He was real. His voice, his humor, and his deep-rooted knowledge of the mountains felt genuine, and that authenticity drew people in immediately. What began as a risk quickly turned into something bigger. His bond with Mark Ramsey gave Moonshiners its heart. They worked like brothers, arguing, laughing, and pushing each other while staying grounded in the same pride and tradition they had learned in the woods. That honesty became the reason the show connected with so many people. As their popularity grew, so did new opportunities. Partnering with Sugarland's distilling company, they brought their craft into the legal world, turning something once hidden into something celebrated. For the first time, Digger could proudly stand behind his work. But fame didn't come easy. Being recognized everywhere he went was overwhelming for someone who had spent decades avoiding attention, and he handled it quietly, always reminding people he was just a mountain craftsman. Then, just as things seemed steady, everything shifted. The success couldn't protect him from what was coming next. This time, the fight wasn't about his craft, it was about his life, and it would happen far away from the cameras. By the 13th season of Moonshiners, Digger Mains had come to represent something steady and unshakable. He was the calm voice in the chaos, the one who always seemed in control. So when fans began to notice he looked more tired than usual, moving slower, quieter than before, questions started spreading online. For months, no one knew what was really going on. Then, in a quiet moment that changed everything, the truth finally came out. Digger told his longtime friend Mark Ramsey that he had been diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, CLL, a slow-growing cancer of the blood and bone marrow. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't break down. In his usual way, he said it plainly. It wasn't the end, but it ain't fun either. The moment was striking in its simplicity. No tears, no spectacle, just honesty. For someone who had spent years battling fire in the dark, this was now a fight happening inside his own body. The news hit fans hard. Messages of support poured in from all over, with people who had never met him calling him family. Many understood the reality of what he was facing. CLL doesn't disappear quickly. It lingers, often managed over years through careful monitoring and treatment. It weakens the body slowly, forcing patience in a fight that can't be rushed. Behind the scenes, the show chose to handle his diagnosis with care rather than drama. Production adjusted to give him time to rest, while his fellow cast members stepped in to support him. He wasn't treated like someone fragile, he was treated like family. And Digger kept going. He stayed at the stills, kept experimenting, kept laughing with Mark. The pace may have slowed, but the fire never went out. In a way, the illness didn't define him. It revealed something deeper. Digger faced it the same way he approached his craft, with patience, precision, and quiet strength. His story became more than just a personal battle. It became a reminder that even the strongest people carry struggles, and that real strength isn't about hiding it, but about facing it head-on. As Moonshiners grew into one of Discovery Channel's biggest shows, questions started to follow. Viewers and critics alike wondered how much of it was real. Could people really be shown making illegal liquor on camera without consequences? The debate never really went away, but it never shook Digger's credibility either. Because when people watched him, they didn't see a character. They saw a man who had lived that life long before the cameras arrived. His knowledge, his hands, his way of working, it all felt too real to fake. And that authenticity is what kept fans believing. For Digger, moonshining wasn't just something for television. It was part of a much older story. The craft dated back generations, long before modern laws and cameras. In early America, farmers turned extra grain into whiskey to survive harsh winters and avoid heavy taxes. During Prohibition, it became a hidden lifeline for entire communities. It wasn't about rebellion, it was about survival. And even after alcohol became legal again, the tradition didn't disappear. It simply went underground, waiting for people like Digger to keep it alive. By the time the spotlight found him, the rules had changed. Distilling without permits was illegal, and the process was now tightly controlled by laws, taxes, and regulations. Still, debates continued. Even as recently as 2024, legal challenges questioned restrictions on small-batch home distilling. For Digger, it wasn't just about legality. It was about preserving something that had meaning, something that connected the past to the present. Over time, moonshining became more than a hidden trade. It became a symbol of culture. In the mountain communities, it brought back pride in a tradition that once had to stay in the shadows. Legal distilleries grew, tourism increased, and Digger found himself in a unique position, bridging the gap between secrecy and celebration. Through him, people didn't just learn about making shine, they learned about history, resilience, and the importance of honoring where you come from, even as the world around you changes.